I'm sure married life shouldn't be so difficult, but marriage to Joanna was more difficult than I could have imagined. The grumbling and complaining just seemed endless. Everything I did was wrong. Before we started dating, I had many hobbies, mainly active recreation and sports, as well as cycling and playing football. Over the years, this all faded away, with Joe saying that we couldn't afford it, that we didn't have time, or that she had ordered something else for the same day. I lost contact with more and more friends and did not participate in trips and events. I was so infatuated with Joe that it took me years to realize what was happening, and it was only when I looked back after a few beers that I realized how much I had missed. Why marry someone if they are so perfect, and then try to change them? Even my friends and family became problems. Not educated enough, drinking too much, or being too loud and rude to Joe's sensibilities. She seemed to take pride in her ability to control our lives and everything that happened in it. There is no end to it. Earn more, work even more, make lists of tasks. All this has become a habit for her. When we first started dating, she was caring, attentive, and quite flexible. There were a few hints of self-demanding, but nothing alarming, and I was fascinated by it. Joanna Farrington Hall, née Farrington, she couldn't give up her maiden name, was a stunning woman from a wealthy family. I am Phil Hall, of course, not stunning and not that rich, but relative to myself, I have achieved good results. Decent job and income, many friends and hobbies, life is good. And then I met Joe, and everything got even better. Tall, with long, straight blonde hair, pale skin, and a graceful English appearance, Joe commands attention. Her blue eyes seem as alive as her personality, always darting around, but with an intense gaze. She is smart, determined, and well aware that she influences most males, but she knows how to deflect unwanted attention. No one was as shocked as I was when she asked me out. I just couldn't understand it. She was clearly out of my league, and I told her so. I'm sick of all these rich, arrogant assholes messing with me. You look different, maybe kinder, and I see that you often smile and joke with your friends. I like it. Next time you'll tell me that I'm a nice guy, and that's not the best reason for a date. She laughed, and she had me in her arms. That smile and eye contact. There was no way I could resist her, and she knew it. I literally lost my breath. I had to concentrate on breathing, and it felt like my heart was about to jump out of my chest. Despite my doubts and the fact that it was very early, I began to think that everything could work out. Joe was truly pleasant company and also very attractive. She worked a lot on her appearance, dressed in designer clothes, used the services of a personal trainer, visited spas and beauty treatments. In general, she spared no expense. And it worked. She continues to look even better in adulthood. Our engagement was going smoothly until an incident happened with an old family friend and her ex, Richard Askew. I caught Joe meeting him for drinks. They seemed to be quite close friends, and he held her hands over the table. I was about to leave, but then I thought, screw it, and walked over, sitting down on the chair next to them. Well, that's nice. Joe's eyes widened, and she removed her hands from the table. It's not what you're thinking. I was explaining to Richard that we were now engaged, and I couldn't date him again. In fact, then the only thing that confuses me is that you are holding hands and those loving eyes. Maybe it's just the wrong time and you didn't have a chance to leave me first. No, I swear. Now Richard is just a friend. I needed to explain everything personally, to do everything right. I love you and want to marry you. I looked at Richard. What can you say in your defense? He seemed in no hurry to answer, the self-confident bastard. Joanna is absolutely right. I asked her out without knowing she was engaged, and I'm glad she thinks highly enough of me to explain everything in person. I don't want to come between you. The words made sense, but I didn't like something about him, and he continued, I think I'd better leave you two to sort out your differences. Honestly, I wish you both the best. And also, Phil, you had a 1 in a million chance. You are a very lucky guy. Joe looked at me. Sorry, I should have told you that I was dating him. Are you telling me the truth, Joe? If it's not me you want, then it's better to sort things out now. You are all I need, please. You don't have to worry about anything. I'm all yours. Joe seemed determined to make amends in the bedroom, and I wasn't going to complain, even embellishing my experience a little because I liked the way she was making amends. There was a week left before the wedding, and I was already starting to get tired of the fact that I really was lucky. Only my mom seemed to think I was a good deal for Joe, too. It wasn't the remarks themselves that bothered me so much as the fact that Joe seemed delighted by them. I was hoping to get at least some kind of protection or support, maybe a hint that she was lucky too or that I was a great guy, but it didn't come. Our conversations became more and more one-sided, and more attention was paid to her. At first I chalked it up to wedding stress. However, much of this was stressful for me too. My initial proposal for a small celebration with close friends was rejected out of hand. The wedding went beyond our original plans and budget, but she had to have the perfect dress, the perfect venue, and the cake, and the ring, and her second cousins had to be added to the guest list, which at that point numbered nearly 270 people. I seemed to get lost in the shuffle. I was often instructed, but usually ignored. I wondered if it would be noticeable if I just didn't show up, and I thought again about why she was marrying me. Despite all my fears, I still came, and the wedding went just fine, right down to the speeches. Her father's speech was more like a lecture addressed to me about how I should support my princess in the way she was used to. Her mother smiled at the same time. But I didn't. I really didn't expect the welcome to the family speech. Joe noticed the look on my face and stood next to me. And I would like to drink to the fact that our two wonderful families will be united by the love that Phil and I share. She gave her father a scathing look as she sat back down. At least I wasn't the only one who felt disapproval. The rest of the day passed without incident. After a whirlwind honeymoon, we settled into married life, and 18 months later our first, and as it turned out, only daughter Jade was born. And she was an absolute miracle to me. Joe struggled with postpartum depression and was determined that she would never go through the trauma of childbirth again. As a result, she declared that Jade would be our only offspring. Joe knew that I always wanted to have more children, but I decided not to have the conversation because she wasn't handling motherhood very well. I did everything I could, taking upon myself part of the worries. When Jade turned 8, Joe wanted to go back to work. Her father was well-connected and got her a job raising funds for a charity. It was only later that I learned that the chief executive of this charity was Richard Askew. She had been working there for over a year when I was invited along with other partners and families to a summer social event. This year, it had a medieval theme with games and fundraising events for the charity. Most were dressed in fancy dress, the most popular being knights and ladies of the manor. To Joe's disappointment, I avoided participating in this event. She bought a lady of the manor outfit with an embroidered tunic, velvet headdress, bowler hat, and silk veil. There were all sorts of games, mock hand-to-hand combat with fake weapons and electronic sensors, knocking each other off logs over the water, and archery competitions. Richard won the mock fencing tournament. Only 4 people could ride well enough to compete. They used foam spears, which were nonetheless quite heavy, and managed to land several hits on the electronic shield sensors. They even managed to get one guy off his horse, although it looked like he would have fallen anyway. To be honest, it was all funny and fun. Then, in front of everyone, Richard approached Joe and asked her for a small souvenir. She took off her veil and tied it to his spear, receiving applause. After that, flirting began before my eyes. I was unhappy that Joe was spending so much time with her boss, so I told her off. "What the hell are you up to?" She laughed. "I don't know. The young knight won my favor." "This is not funny, Joe." "Come on, Phil. Aren't you going to fight for your damsel in distress? Save her from a young scoundrel with a bad reputation?" "I shouldn't do this. And you don't look upset at all. On the contrary, you like it. We are married, and I thought we were committed to each other." "Calm down. It's just a joke." "Is it true? You two turned on each other, and it makes me wonder what else you might be doing at work." With these words, I left, and if I hoped that she would follow me, I was sorely mistaken. I left the hall without the slightest idea of where to go. When in doubt, find a pub, and I spotted one called Farmer's Rest, and thought it would do just fine. I sat in the bar, still angry, drinking my first pint. By the second, I thought my reaction might have been a little over the top, but that was because it was him, Richard Askew, always staying in the background. I tried to think about what I should say to Joe when I got home, but as it turned out, I didn't need to worry. Joe wasn't there. It's scary to think where she could be, but all my SMS remained unanswered. She returned after midnight, but did not speak to me. I was determined not to ask where she was. The next day, we just murmured something in greeting to each other at lunch. That evening, Joe announced that we needed to talk, and I laughed. "Why are you laughing?" "Yes, it's simple." Joe ignored my words and continued. "No one, including you, has the right to control me. I admit that since we started working together, I have become closer to Richard again. I don't know what I expected, but certainly not this." "Did you have sex with him?" "Don't be so rude. We have a history together. He was always partial to me." "So, have you already had sex with him?" "Stop saying that. I have to be honest and say that the attraction is mutual." "Have you already had sex with him? You are such a child." I looked at her silently, incredulously. "You left me at a charity event. He was next to me when you weren't there. Oh my God, you've got to be kidding. If you hadn't run away, this would never have happened." "Oh, I doubt it, Joe. I think spreading his legs was inevitable for him. One quarrel and you jump into his bed, and you have the audacity to accuse me that it is my fault that you became a traitor. I am not a traitor. Then what's the matter? Is it love? Are you leaving me for him?" "No, of course not. I love you." "What then is a one-time mistake? You feel guilty. This doesn't mean anything. You only love me, it's just sex. What kind of bullshit excuse are you making up? There's no need to react like that. It was a mistake. We quarreled and I was upset. Forgive me. Okay?" "No, it's not okay. And you managed to, quite successfully, get into this situation in order to justify yourself. Why tell me about this now? I wanted to be honest and see if we couldn't work things out. I think it's more like you wanted to throw it in my face. You're right about the fact that everything needs to be sorted out, first by getting a divorce. You cannot divorce me. You have no evidence of infidelity, no videos, no tapes, no photographs. What makes you think that I need them? In this country, when people don't want to be married, they can just get a divorce. This can even be done via the internet, without lawyers. There is no need to prove who had sex with whom. There is no difference. I don't even know if there are investigators here. On the other hand, we also don't have alienation of affection lawsuits in this country, which is also a good thing, otherwise your precious charity could go under, and then what will the poor animals do? Not to mention Richard and his hefty salary. We won't get a divorce because of this episode. Don't even think about it. If you want to see Jade again, our family has more than enough money to trick you. I looked at the consequences of the divorce. It was a nightmare. Even if I win joint custody, I will be left with absolutely no money and will live in a box with, hopefully, real walls. How wrong I was about lawyers. Before I knew it, her father's firm had already sent us for a consultation. What it is. Nowadays, people cannot make a decision without the help of either a consultant or a lawyer or both. Forget about thinking for yourself. And one more thing. Why should I move out? Because it was you who had an affair. It wasn't a romance, and I need time to find myself and understand what I want. Find yourself? Really? I thought the problem was that Richard caught you with your legs spread. This won't help, Mr. Hall. Dr. Taylor allowed a slight frown to appear on her usually stoic face. Joe intervened during a pause in the conversation. That's not the point. I want you, but I don't know if you can survive it. I'm not content with having to apologize for the next 40 years. Did you apologize? I mean, I've heard the word sorry, but not once have you said it convincingly. Oh, grow up, I apologize, and we have to move on. For me, there was no remorse or recognition of the consequences. You can't see beyond yourself. If you have any regrets, it's only about yourself, about not living up to your own standards, about Joanna Farrington Hall being a cheater. You don't worry about me except by dictating the terms for us to stay together. You just want to play the victim because I hurt your pride. Maybe this is so. Your cheating definitely hurt me, pride and all. But more than that, I can't accept the fact that the one who should care about me more than anyone else actually doesn't care that much. For God's sake, it was just one time, just sex that doesn't mean anything. I was angry with you. Great, you left us for something meaningless. This is even worse, and I don't know if it was just one time. You could have sex with him for months. How dare you? If you can't trust me, then we're screwed, and we can end it here. Actually, that's a good idea. A very good one. That's the first thing you said. That makes sense. What? Can't you be serious? I got up and went out. What are you doing? Don't you dare leave me. It's still a matter of control for you, isn't it? Well, you don't control me. I'm free to leave this room, and I'm free to leave you. Phil, don't you dare leave. Phil, I was waiting for a call from Dr. Taylor after I didn't show up for my next appointment. Mr. Hall, I'm clarifying about our session today. I won't come, Dr. Taylor. I thought so. Mr. Hall, Phil, strictly off the record, there are some aspects of your wife's personality that you should be careful with. Do you mean something else besides betrayal? She has some narcissistic traits. She will never forgive you for what she did. Nothing you do will be right. Beware of parental alienation. It's worth reading about. The conversation ended abruptly. I started reading. What I discovered horrified me. The traits described seemed to suit Jo, especially her sense of self-worth and superiority. The lack of empathy, the need for attention, criticizing others and not accepting negative feedback, all struck me. I realized for the first time that I might lose Jade completely. Parental alienation describes the psychological manipulation of a child against the other parent. Basically, Jade could be brainwashed and isolated from me, and that wasn't an option. The long-term effects on the child and some of the case studies are heartbreaking. Legally and financially, I would lose. None of the ideas of separation and revenge looked viable in the cold light of day. I am not a former soldier, an expert in the field of information technology, and have no friends in the lower strata of society. I am an ordinary person who finds himself at the mercy of the court and the system. Is there any way I can avoid losing everything? And then I had an epiphany. Well, not exactly an epiphany, but a vague idea that I could stay with Jo and raise Jade together. She's almost 10, so I need another 6 years. I don't need to be in love with Jo, and in my mind, I don't need to be faithful to her anymore. So maybe it will be an arranged marriage. I'll be much better off financially. I just need to stay friends for a few years, and I'll eliminate the possibility of losing Jade. After Dr. Taylor's warning, I was really worried about what might happen if I wasn't around. Jo begged me to give her one last chance to explain everything, but I refused unless she promised to stop blocking my access to Jade after moving in with my mom. She refused to do this and insisted that there would be no problems with access, so I reluctantly went to our old house. Let's just sit down and clarify the situation. The truth is that I always needed something more, and if it weren't for Richard, sooner or later it would have been someone else. Why then did you marry me? It's obvious. I love you, idiot. Thanks to you, I'm happy, safe, and content. I get along with people, have a lot of energy, and love attention. I need you, but I also need something else. And what you want is Richard Askew. Not necessarily. He's not bad in bed, but I can leave him if that's what's bothering you. I know you don't like him. Of course, if you leave me in less than 30 minutes, he will be here. He has always been in love with me. Wow. Now you have shown yourself in all your glory, so ruthless. Maybe you deserve each other? This doesn't have to be the end of us. Look at me. You won't find anyone better than me, and I will take care of your every need. But do you want to have sex with other guys? No need to be so rude. Talking to Richard reminded me exactly what I was missing. I would like to be more open with you, but I was afraid of losing you. It doesn't have to happen often, and I can be discreet. We were both silent for a long time. The consequences of the divorce made me think about them. I can come back if we open our relationship. Joe didn't expect such a comment and looked shocked, but then a smile appeared on her face. Fine, baby. I can be your hot wife if you want to be in on it. You can watch, or I can tell you all about it. Maybe it will help you understand. That's not exactly what I meant. I don't want to hear about what you're doing. I would like to swap with other couples. Why on earth would you do that when you have me? Maybe it's my innate sense of justice, but on the other hand, it will give you the extra emotion you seem to crave. She looked down at her body, spreading her thighs slightly in her tight skirt. But baby, I don't want to share with you. You don't need anything other than this. I knew I needed to appeal to the part of her that yearned to be worshipped. Just imagine all the guys you can enjoy with. They will be desperate to sleep with such a beauty like you. You will be the center of attention, and they will do whatever you want. I realized that she liked this idea even more than her desire to control me, so I continued with my Hail Mary, last chance plan. This is the only way we can stay together, and there are several other conditions. You will need to be tested for STDs before I touch you again, and any dates will strictly involve the use of condoms. No non-consensual games, and to find other like-minded people, we will join the site. And one more thing, leave Richard and never meet him again. You're right, I can't stand him. Joe rejected the idea and made a fuss, at one point even accusing me of trying to cheat. I suppressed my laughter, knowing that she simply did not understand the irony, and asked if she had already submitted her resignation letter. This is not a negotiation, Joe. It's either this or I'm just leaving. Joe reluctantly agreed. She saw how adamant I was, but no doubt she thought that sooner or later she would find some way to get around me. She also quit, saying that Dad had found her another position, and vowed that she would never see Richard again. I wasn't naive enough to believe her completely, but it was a concession from which I expected more resistance. I signed up for several open couples sites and was amazed at the number of responses. The photo of Joe in an elegant evening dress attracted the attention of all ages more than the semi-nude photos in other profiles. We moved on to correspondence with several couples online. The first couple we actually met were Dave and Gail. The meeting was normal. They were a little younger than us, very fit and attractive. Dave was very interested in Joe, but I didn't like Gail, and we left the meeting as an interesting evening, much to Joe's disappointment. At one point, we exchanged short kisses. Joe seemed excited when I kissed Gail, although her kiss with David was longer and more exciting. After that, I selected couples based on the wife's profile. I wasn't too worried about what Joe would get. To be fair, most of them were on par with their partners, but not always. Every month or so, we met up with other couples, not always for sex. As a rule, the men were wonderful, and their wives were very attractive. The ages ranged from 20 to 40, with different appearances and personalities. I certainly had a lot of fun dating. Joe's loyalty no longer mattered to me, and she enjoyed the attention of new men. This continued intermittently for several years. In normal life, Joe's behavior improved slightly, and his complaints decreased. She knew I would leave if she returned to her old ways, and an uneasy truce would develop between us. I spent more and more time with Jade, who often fought with her mother as a teenager, while I quietly strengthened the bonds we had. I appreciated it all the more, because I was well aware of how easily it could all end. It was definitely cheaper to keep her. If we separated, I doubt I could afford to own my own property, and on top of that, I would have to do all the shopping, cooking, and cleaning. Moreover, I have had intimate relationships with many attractive women that I would never have approached as a single guy. I would have preferred fidelity and a monogamous relationship, but this seemed like the best way out of the situation. I didn't love Joe as much as I used to, but our relationship was quite good. Although I began to miss the deep connection with someone special, Joe was no longer that person to me. Jade was already 13, and I just needed to last a few more years. Then I started talking to a couple in their early 30s named Megan and Ian. The conversation was comfortable and friendly, and we ended up exchanging several photos of ourselves in clothes. The couple were stunning. Megan was elegant and very pretty with curly red hair, and Ian looked quite fit. Ian was friendly and interesting, while Megan was quite calm, perhaps a little shy. We agreed to meet at a restaurant and see how things were going. Joe got ready by wearing a tight little black dress that showed off her figure. I was a little surprised by the choice of outfit and assumed it was quite revealing. She insisted that she wanted to look decent and that she needed high-heeled shoes, since Ian was very tall. We walked into an upscale bar and saw them in a quiet booth, smiling, greeting each other like old friends, and hugging each other. Ian was wearing a suit that matched my jeans and shirt. Seeing Megan in person took my breath away. The computer screen did not convey all her beauty. She was wearing a midnight blue dress that seemed to shimmer in the streetlights, not too revealing, and mid-heeled heels. Her highlighted red hair was a mass of curls and pins, but it looked completely natural. Maybe Joe is right about the outfit. Lots of smiles and confirmation that we are glad to finally meet. We exchanged the first few small phrases about how we found this place. We ordered a couple of bottles of wine, and while I tried not to look at Megan too obviously, Ian looked at Joe more openly. The conversation continued. Everyone admitted that they had hardly thought about anything else all week. I can't believe we got along so well. It's more casual than I thought. It feels like we've been friends for a long time. The last thing we need is for you guys to be on edge. The others agreed with my remark. I saw the way Joe looked at Ian. If anyone didn't like the state of things, she seemed fascinated by him. And it wasn't long before she went into full flirting mode. Megan bit her lip. It was a nervous gesture, but it drew my attention to her rather full lips. Between the bar and the restaurant, there was a dance floor with music playing, and I asked Megan if she wanted to dance. She looked at Ian, who nodded in agreement. At the same time, he stood up and extended his hand to Joe. She smiled and took it without even looking in my direction. I remember very well our first touch, when Megan took my hand and I looked into her eyes. My heart jumped slightly, as did my groin. I put my other hand around her waist. Everything is fine? Megan just smiled and nodded in response as we began to move slowly to the music. I saw that she was nervous, so I continued chatting. By the way, I like your dress. It's very elegant. Thank you. I hoped you would like it. It took me forever to choose. I was aiming for sexuality, not promiscuity and all that. Well, I would say that you did it. You look elegant and stylish. Megan surprised me by explaining that this was the first time they had met like this. Their interest was sparked by meeting old college friends, drinking a lot, which led to some flirting, but they didn't go through with it. Ian wanted to explore and experiment and convinced Megan to give it a try. I felt there was more to it, but I didn't want to pry too much too soon. Would you mind if I held you closer to me, Megan? No, and you can call me Meg. Everyone else does that. Okay. Why don't you put your hands on my shoulders? When she did this, I ran my hands along her petite waist. What do you think? It's nice, Phil. I like being around you. I bit my lip again. Just try to relax, Meg. I'm not going to do anything that will make you uncomfortable. Tell me if I do, and we'll work it out. Thank you, Phil. It means a lot. I want to trust you, and this is a great way to start something I hope is special. I hugged her and forgot about Joe and Ian for a while. Lost in the moment, I wanted to kiss her, but I resisted the urge. It felt too early, and I hoped it would be something to look forward to. We looked at each other and saw Ian and Joe kissing. His arms were also a little lower. I was amazed at how little I cared. I never felt the same after her cheating, and even if we could get over it, her attitude made that impossible. Meg looked up at me. How do you feel seeing them kiss? I expected to feel jealous, but no. I think it's because you're in my arms. Meg smiled back. You're too cute. This is probably what worried me the most all week. I never doubted that I liked you, but I thought that jealousy could become insurmountable, but it did not. It's like a regular date, which is what I like, but with an extra twist of excitement. More than just exciting. For me, it's the same. I don't mind because we're together. I pulled her a little closer to me, enjoying the closeness of her body, and let my hands slide to the back of her thighs, trying to avoid grabbing her ass, and feeling her breasts meet my chest as we continued to almost dance. Ian and Joe slid towards us. Are you guys okay? I let Meg answer. Yes, everything is fine. You guys are a great couple. I felt proud when Ian said that. For some reason, I really liked that we were called a couple. Meg turned to me. I can't agree more. I think so too. We sat back in the booth while Ian and Joe continued dancing. I leaned over to chat with her over the music, our faces naturally close. She leaned over and kissed me tenderly, her lips so soft and her perfume so intoxicating. The feeling was electric, like the first kiss in school, exciting and nervous. Meg gasped softly, and I continued the kiss, not caring where we were. I liked her gentle answers and the sensations they evoked. I became more and more passionate and pulled her towards me, not caring where we were and unable to stop. My mouth opened completely. Her taste was so sweet and hot that I moaned. We finally broke the kiss, both panting, her breasts slamming against me and me completely tense. Wow, this is so unusual, thank you. I'm serious, there's no rush. We can move at the pace that suits you. We don't have to follow them. I know. We'll just do our own thing. We looked at each other and saw Joe looking at us and Ian saying, Wow. Meg looked at him and blushed, pressing her face to my chest. I heard muffled, Looks like they saw everything. Probably, yes, we were a little late. Do you feel awkward because of this? No, and you? Not one bit, and I don't want to let you go. Ian and Joe joined us, and we continued talking about friends, family, travel, and work. Time flew by, confirming that we had a lot in common and a connection. Ian interrupted his hesitation. Would you guys like to have a nightcap with us, or can we do it another time if it seems too hasty? Joe looked excited, and I looked at Meg, who nodded, biting her lip again, and said, How about we come back and see how it goes? No promises? Yes, quite fair. Any of us can stop at any time. Joe added with a laugh, Why don't we swap partners for the duration of the trip so that no one gets lost? Sure, sounds like a good plan. I offered Meg my hand, she took it, and I led her out of the bar, my stomach shaking with excitement and some anxiety. Joe and Ian followed me, holding hands. I noticed that the waitress was looking at us with raised eyebrows and a smile. I opened the car door for Meg, feeling strange but excited as I took the opportunity to inspect her. Her dress rode up on her hips, and I noticed her very slender legs covered in nylon. I looked back and saw Ian's hand on Joe's ass as he walked her into the car. I got into the car and, unable to resist, leaned over to kiss her, wondering what I would get, her cheek or her lips. She turned and kissed me tenderly on the lips. We started the engine and drove off, seeing that Ian had followed us. Are you happy with this evening, Meg? Yes, everything was wonderful, more comfortable than I expected. But that doesn't mean I'm still not scared. I would say that you shouldn't be afraid, but I'm afraid myself. You're very attractive and I like your company. Just remember that everything is under control. She giggled and reached out to squeeze my hand. I like it, thank you. You make everything simpler. I had so many doubts. I think Ian and Joe hit it off too. After a short drive, we arrived and walked into their home, shared some wine at the breakfast bar, and then settled into the living room. I was glad that Meg decided to sit next to me. We talked for a bit. I kept glancing at Meg. She really has an amazing figure. When I looked back, Ian's hand was on Joe's thigh, and he moved in for a kiss. I decided to do the same with Meg and started kissing. It didn't take long before Ian led Joe out. Meet me for breakfast at 9 in the morning. Not just sex, but a sleepover. I was more than happy with the prospect of spending the night with Meg and agreed. Meg also nodded in agreement. I began to kiss her more and more often, unable to stop, and then she began to have serious jitters. You are, of course, a good guy, but I'm not sure I can do this. I was disappointed, but I replied, It's okay, Meg. You should be absolutely comfortable with what we're doing, and you should be sure that this is exactly what you want. Then we heard the unmistakable sound of the bed creaking upstairs and knew what it meant. With these words, Meg took a deep breath, stood up, offered her hand, and led me upstairs. As we walked past one of the bedrooms, I heard my wife moaning. Meg led me into the bedroom, which was clearly the master bedroom. She deftly unzipped the back of her dress and let it fall. I was mesmerized. In black high heels, a blue transparent bra and thong, she looked like a vision. Her skin was so tight and perfectly porcelain. I remembered to close my mouth so that the staring would not be so noticeable, but she got it. So you like what you see? I more than like it. You are stunning. Well, it looks like I got your attention, now it's your turn. I tried to be cool and courageous, but I felt rushed and awkward, and it took me no more than a few seconds to undress. Meg looked me up and down, and I felt myself blush. That's very nice. Looks like I'll get a better deal. I was delighted by this remark and went up to her to kiss her. The shy housewife turned out to be a sexy goddess, and I wanted more and more. We took a moment to recover before having sex again, rolling around and trying different positions. We were awakened by the sound of the head of the bed hitting the wall in the next room. Ian and Joe were obviously getting to know each other again. It was strangely erotic and had an immediate effect on us. Meg was more than happy to get the same thing as Joe. Breakfast turned into casual conversation after the ice was broken. We exchanged opinions without going into too much detail. It looked like Joe and Ian were having a good time too, and we agreed to meet again. For 6 months, I continued to meet with Ian and Meg, and I thoroughly enjoyed each meeting. Joe started asking if I had feelings for Meg. I denied, saying it was just a coincidence. In the end, Ian said they wouldn't date us anymore because he thought Meg and I were too close. I didn't argue, admitting to myself that I had fallen in love, and that, if possible, I would switch places with Joe in a heartbeat. But unfortunately, that's where it all ended. 4 months had passed since our last meeting when Joe, out of the blue, said that Ian and Meg had invited us to a party. Apparently, it was a party thrown by a couple they met online. They weren't sure about it and wanted to have friends there in case it got too crowded. Yes, we didn't like parties. We agreed that we would only change with other couples, no orgies, groups, or singles. But I wanted to see Meg again, and I agreed to go. Joe was very interested in the idea, adding that she was interested in what such parties entailed and that they could open up new opportunities. I was pleasantly surprised when we entered the hangout, which was a large and secluded private home. The party was a casual affair with drinks and a meet and greet. The owners introduced us to some of the regulars. They all seemed nice people, but there was no sign of Ian or Megan. Joe started hanging out with a guy named Jeff. He was young and handsome, and she seemed to like him. They went into the bar, and I chatted with the owners and was introduced to another couple. 20 or 30 minutes had passed when Joe returned and said she was going upstairs to get to know Jeff better. Wait a second, this is not part of our agreement, remember? He is single, and we only exchange with couples. But it's a party. Hell no, we still stick to our boundaries. I could see she was annoyed and wondered if she couldn't just go anyway, but then I saw her shake her head slightly at her future lover across the room. By the time Ian and Meg arrived, she had calmed down a little. I noticed that Meg was wearing a dress that was very revealing for her, short and low-cut. She looked impressive. But of course she did not feel comfortable. Ian was as gregarious as ever, but Meg looked depressed and awkward, and I decided that this was not going to be a party she or I would enjoy. It wasn't long before Ian led Joe towards the bar again, leaving Meg and me. We chatted, but she seemed preoccupied. The conversation was strained, lacking the warmth of our previous meetings. Would you like to go away, just go for a ride without any obligations? Maybe get some fresh air?" She looked so relieved, and then she burst into tears. I tried to calm her down, asking what happened. "Ian wants me to try a special kind of sex, with a few guys. I don't want this, but Ian is very insistent on it, and insists that we come to the party. I only agreed when Ian said you would be here. I knew that you wouldn't want me to do anything that made me uncomfortable." "Wait, this doesn't make sense. Why would Ian invite me, knowing that I would refuse?" It dawned on us both at the same time. Meg spoke first. "Maybe he had something planned for Joe. They were texting to agree. We went looking for them, but they weren't in the bar, and I turned to Meg, shaking my head. Looking at my watch, I realized that at least 45 minutes had passed since they left together. I quickly ran up the stairs and was already moving along the corridor when Joe came staggering out of the bedroom door, trying to straighten her dress, and we almost collided. The door was open, and I saw Ian and Jeff inside. At least she had the decency to look embarrassed. I stared at her in rage. "Is this my fault too, Joe? This is my body, and I will do whatever I want with it. Don't be shy, but I'm leaving." I turned on my heels, past Meg on the stairs, and headed towards the exit. I heard the click of heels behind me as I walked down the stairs and across the tiled hallway. I turned to tell Joe exactly where she could go, but I saw Meg looking back at me. She was in a panic. Her eyes were wide. "Can I go with you?" I looked up at the landing and saw a third man leading into Joe's bedroom with two others. I nodded to Meg and turned to leave. The trip was calm. We talked a little about what we were going to do and came to the conclusion that both Ian and Joe were narcissistic assholes. In my case, I thought that Joe would always try to win and would not accept any balance in our relationship. Meg's assessment was more blunt. "Ian is just a jerk." This made me laugh. Exactly the level of personal analysis that I could understand and for which I did not need a consultant. "Can I take you home?" "I'm not very fond of company. Only if everything is fine with you alone, and if you take me to my mother. I don't want to see Ian anytime soon." I left her, promising to stay in touch, and returned to the house alone, acutely aware of the silence and darkness. Joe returned home the next day. I didn't know if she would try to argue or apologize. "Don't even worry, Joe. It's all over between us." "Why?" "It's just sex. We've done it with dozens of people. What's the difference? I've had enough 3 guys all night long. You seem to be saying that you can always get more. By the way, you are right about this. You are attractive. Many men want you. You won. Congratulations." She seemed to be barely able to contain her smile. "Sorry, I was upset because you ruined my fun with Jeff." "Nonsense. You and Ian arranged everything. Used Megan to distract me while you both got what you wanted. It's always the same with you. You are like a spoiled child, and it is never enough. You need to go to the clinic and get checked. I won't touch you again." Joe didn't take my leaving very well. She started stalking me and didn't allow me to see Jade. At one point, she tried to force her way into my parents' house where I was staying, ranting about how I was treating her badly. I tried to kick her out without using force. Fortunately, my mother showed no restraint. She slapped her and literally threw her out, adding, "You need help, Joe. I'm not sure you're healthy." This remark provoked another barrage of insults from Joe. I gave Joe money for Jade, but she referred me to the child support agency. I couldn't help but laugh when they told me I had to pay her less, and she got so angry that she threatened the manager and got a police warning. I went to pick up Jade, but Joe said she was with her friends. I was stunned to see Richard Askew emerge from the living room calm as a cucumber. "What the heck? Like I said, if you leave me, Richard will be here, and here he is. Soon, he will take me upstairs. Again." I turned to Richard, who had a smug look on his face. I was definitely going to beat the crap out of him. And then, I remembered Dr. Taylor's warning from many years ago. Maybe it's a setup, a trap. Joe hated losing at anything, and if I got arrested for assault, Joe would keep Jade like everything else. Surely she wouldn't go that far? Would she? Joe continued, "I'm sure Richard will be a wonderful father for Jade. He will be only too happy to adopt her." Finally, I noticed that her phone, partially hidden on the shelf, was undoubtedly recording. I laughed, almost hysterically. Nice try, Joe, but I won't touch a single hair on his rich little head. You are something special, and you both truly deserve each other. By the way, does Richard know that you had sex with several guys at the same time and without protection? Richard almost choked. As I left, I casually added, "Better sign up for a sexual health clinic, mate. You don't want anything bothering you." While Joe was having sex, I received a number of offensive messages and videos. Her comments were very instructive. "Look what you threw away that you could have enjoyed now." Never mind, I have a real man, and he is much better and bigger than you. I thought it was strange that she would waste time texting when she was doing so well, and I didn't care anymore as long as Jade was safe. If you give me Jade, you will have more time to have fun with anyone. Although I heard that Richard moved out, so you have some space to fill, so to speak. At this point, she hung up, no doubt amazed that two men had already rejected her. The divorce was a nightmare. It dragged on longer and longer. She kept resisting and making up all sorts of nonsense about me having affairs and being abusive. She had no evidence, and some of her claims were so outlandish that the family court, social workers, and lawyers began to realize what she was all about. Anyone who disagreed with her received a barrage of insults. I realized that the Joe I lived with was just a simplified version of her. Even Joe's parents began to worry about their princess's erratic behavior, but it was also my fault, because I was the one who abandoned her. Now, at 14 years old, Jade had no choice, but the family court listened to her wishes, and she wanted to stay with me. I continued to handle most of my parenting responsibilities without missing a single event, class, or parent-teacher meeting, and turned into a teen taxi service. Joe perceived this choice as a betrayal. After all, how could you not choose her? At the custody hearing, she lost her temper. When my lawyer asked for a psychological evaluation of Joe to ensure Jade's safety, I thought Joe was going to explode. She started cursing right in the middle of the trial and completely lost her temper. She thought I was a bastard, just like my lawyer. Honestly, she might be right, but he was on my side. She was again found in contempt of court when she continued to cause problems with my access to Jade. I kept a journal and had her message chain as proof. The judge warned her that one more such incident and she would be taken into custody. At the last hearing, she lost her temper again when the judge confirmed joint custody and called him a lost old ass, for which she was prosecuted and fined. Over time, I spent more and more time with Jade. Joe seemed to have lost interest in parenting and Jade's bad behavior, although I didn't observe any of that. All I had to do was pay off another 18 months of the mortgage, and then we could sell the house, or Joe would have to buy out my share. Another thing I did was save small amounts of money over the years, and that helped a lot. The day after receiving confirmation of the divorce, my doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw a red-haired vision. "Hello. I guess you're not interested in dating a recently divorced and reformed girl who wants only one thing, to settle down with the right and strictly monogamous man? I think we have someone who fits that description, if you'd like to come in." The truth was that I stayed in touch with Meg, and we supported each other through our divorces. Ian seemed to be on the same path as Joe, and like Joe, he periodically asked for forgiveness, and then returned to his previous behavior. I didn't see much of Joe after that, only making a brief appearance at Jade's 16th birthday. I thought that, after such a long separation, we could have a reasonable conversation. I would consider coming back to you, Phil, if you begged. You know that I am the best thing you ever had, and don't even try to say that you don't miss me. As I left, I replied, "You're right, Joe. It would be completely pointless to tell you about this. The next time I saw her was at the station. When we saw Jade off to university, I was there with Meg. As the train pulled out, I heard Joe say to her, 'I could take him away from you if I really wanted to, but I like all the other men too much, and his pride can't handle it.'" Meg smiled sweetly. "Oh, darling, you really are very bitter and completely out of touch with reality, aren't you?" Meg turned and took my hand, and we walked the stroller away. For all the holidays, Jade returned to me and Meg. Thanks in part to doting on my stepbrother, we actually lived happily ever after.